welcome to today's live forum about the new State of Texas Assessment of Academic Readiness, or STAAR. This is the first of 3 live forums that we will hold to answer your questions about the exam. We'll give you some more information about the dates and times of the upcoming forums at the end of the program. Or you can visit the Dallas ISD STAAR page at www.dallasisd.org/STAAR for more information. Before I introduce today's experts, I want to invite you to share your questions during the broadcast by calling 972-925-3123 or sending them to us from the online forum link found on www.dallasisd.org. You can send those questions in English and Spanish. Puede hacer sus preguntas en inglés o en español. Today's panel of experts about STAAR includes Vincent Reyes, Interim Division Executive for Teaching and Learning, Elizabeth Casas, Executive Director, Multi-Language Enrichment Program, Clarissa Blair, Director of Reading Language Arts, Cecilia Oakley, Executive Director of Evaluation and Testing, Stephanie Elizalde, Director of Science, Technology and Math, Tanya Brown, Director of Curriculum and Instruction for Special Education, and Barbara Thomas, Director of Social Studies. We're going to start the program with a brief overview of STAAR and the changes students will see in the upcoming administration of the test. After that, we will answer questions that have been previously submitted and any questions that come in during the program. Mr. Reyes will now present the overview of STAAR.
Next week, students in 3rd through 8th grades and those who are in the 9th grade for the first time will take the first set of the STAAR exams. Students who started high school in previous school years will continue to take the TAKS until they graduate. For elementary and middle school students, the STAAR test will cover the same subjects that the TAKS did: reading, writing, math, science, and social studies. For high school students and middle school students taking classes for high school credit, the tests are much different than what they used to be. High school students will take 12 end-of-course exams in the areas of English, math, science, and social studies. There will be 3 separate exams in each of these areas, and students will take the exams for the subjects that they are learning in a particular year. For example, students who take biology will take the biology end-of-course exam that year, which will count as one of the science end-of-course exams. Students who take the world history class will take the end-of-course exam for that test for that subject. The reasons that there are more exams with STAAR is that the new assessment is designed to measure how well students acquired the knowledge and skills that were taught that particular year in that subject. Of course, this is not the only change students will experience starting this coming week. One of the biggest changes is that the STAAR exams are more rigorous than past standardized tests, which means that they will be more difficult. The reason that the exams are more difficult is that they will measure better how well prepared our students are to meet the challenges of college, starting even at the 3rd grade level. In fact, we have some sample questions available on the STAAR page of our website so that students and parents can have an idea of the knowledge and skills that will be tested with STAAR. I want to encourage you to visit the site and browse through all the resources we have there. Another important change is that students will no longer have all day to take each exam. The state has determined that students will have a 4-hour time limit for each exam. Again, this is a kind of change that will help prepare students for college because most of the exams they take will be like this, such as the SAT or ACT, or even advanced placement tests that have a time limit. You may be wondering, how will the STAAR exams figure into determining whether a student is promoted to the following grade? The results of the STAAR exams will be only one of the factors used to determine grade promotion. We will also take into account the student's grades, the teacher's recommendation, and other criteria. There are still some details that the Texas Education Agency is resolving about what will be the passing scores for the test, and probably won't have a determination until after the tests are finished. That is why this year schools will not be ranked by the TEA. They will retain the ranking they had this year for the 2012-2013 school year. Then the rankings of exemplary, recognized, academically acceptable, and unacceptable will disappear and will be replaced by other rankings yet to be determined. Students will have 3 levels of achievement: advanced, satisfactory, and unsatisfactory depending on the results of the STAAR end-of-course test this year and the test of the spring of 2013 for the rest of the grades. As a parent of school-aged children myself, I realize that some of these changes can be daunting for us and for our children. But the Dallas ISD has been working diligently to prepare schools and students for these tests. Yes, it will be an adjustment because any change is, but we will continue to provide the support that our students need to succeed in the form of resources, additional tutoring, and special programs. In fact, the district is offering preparation workshops for 9th grade students for the end-of-course exams. One of them is tomorrow. The remaining ones will take place in April. All of the preparation sessions will take place at North Dallas and Skyline High Schools and at Nolan Estes Plaza. We also have tutorials in English and Spanish for some subjects on the District STAAR webpage. These sessions are a great resource, and we are looking forward to students taking advantage of the opportunity. I hope this brief overview has helped you understand the STAAR test just a little bit better.
Thank you, Mr. Reyes, for explaining some of the changes our students will see with the new test. We have many questions that we have received already, so we're now going to move on to that portion of the program. Our panel of experts will be answering these questions that will be asked in English or Spanish as they were submitted. We've received this question several times, Cecilia, so maybe you can clarify. How will the test be used for promotion to the next grade level?
Well, this year in 2012, we will not have performance standards for grades 3 through 8, so there will not be a requirement based on the test of promotion. However, for grades 9 or grade 9 or those that take the end-of-course exams, there will be information, or they will have another opportunity to take the test because there will be performance standards. But again, it will not be based, it will not determine advancement of grade.
Right, it will not be the only criteria that is for 9th grade.
Correct.
Okay. And another, Vincent, I'm sorry, do you have something to add?
I wanted to add that at grade 9, though, it's important for students and parents to understand that the end of course does count this year. While it may not determine whether they're promoted to the next grade this year, it will impact their graduation because they have to meet certain criteria on the end of course, and this is only for 9th grade.
And they have to have like a certain number of points or something in cumulative, right?
That's correct.
Great. Another area that probably needs to be clarified because there's been some changes recently is the 15%. Whether the test will count for 15% of the grade.
And the 15% was for the EOC at the end-of-course exams, whereas the state had determined that it needed to be a part of the grade. The commissioner, in a letter dated in February, allowed the states, or the districts, to defer for 1 year. As of last night, our board did approve the recommendation from the district to defer for 1 year. So this will not happen this school year.
And then next year we'll probably be back here talking about what's going to happen next year. Great. So students in 9th grade will take 12 end-of-course exams, but they're not going to take them all in 1 year, right? This will be spread out throughout their high school years. Is that correct? And how is that going to work?
Right, but depending on the course that they are taking, if they are taking it and complete it in the spring, they will take the exam. So a student may take 3 to 4 years to accumulate or to take those 12 exams.
And one of the easier ways to help parents remember that is that the assessment follows the course. So if a student is enrolled in Algebra 1, then they take the Algebra 1 end of course. It would be almost impossible for a student to be enrolled in Algebra 1, Geometry, and Algebra 2 all at the same time, taking all of those end of course exams.
Right. This is kind of a general background question, but the teachers and students have any input in how all this STAAR was determined with the state? Was there something like that?
Well, teachers were asked to be in the panel when they reviewed items and questions, and so they did get the content experts from the classroom to help with that with the state. Students more than likely were not, but they were tested and field tested to get appropriate responses.
Great. This is a question that's been very popular, and we've been asked in several ways, but when will the results be available? A parent wrote, I understand the state will not release the scores until November or October or November. Why can't they just give us raw scores sooner so we can plan for the 2012-2013 school year? What is the schedule for getting results for schools and for parents?
Well, in June we will get the EndofCourse exam with the standards, passing standards, and we will also get results of the raw scores for the district to use to plan. We may need to look into what we can provide to the parent. Right now there will not be a parent report from the state, but we'll look into what we can provide so they can have some information.
At the district level?
At the district level.
How are students being prepared for these more rigorous tests?
Well, there were updates made in our curriculum planning guides throughout the district and all our content areas to specifically address the increased rigor in preparation for these assessments. It's important to note the standards that are being assessed are still the same standards for this year in almost every area, with the exception my colleague can speak to social studies in a minute, but the other areas, the standards have remained the same. The level of rigor of how those standards are assessed and the prioritization of standards. We used to say all standards were created equal. Under our new assessment system, certain standards or readiness standards are more important, if you will, than supporting standards.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to speak a little bit about the changes in social studies?
This year, we adopted, the state adopted new standards in July. Those new standards were to help our students go deeper in their thinking and the concepts of social studies. In order for us to prepare our students for the upcoming test, we've updated our curriculum planning guides. We have created new lessons and activities. We also have provided for our students review packets that can be found on Curriculum Central. We're having training for our teachers so that they will know exactly what to do in order to prepare the students to be successful.
For reading language arts, we've had the standards for a couple of years now, but the test is testing those standards differently in terms of more thinking kinds of questions and more depth in the writing.
So really, even though the test is different, what the students are learning, it's not really that different from what they were learning for the tax and what they're learning now. You mentioned earlier off camera that some of the difference in the test, for example, they have 2 essay questions instead of 1. Can you elaborate a little bit?
Yes, for tax they had students in 4th, 7th, and high school had 1 question, and it was a simple question like, what was your favorite adventure? But for STAAR and the EndofCourse exam, they will have a stimulus one that they have to read something and then think about it and write, but they have 2 compositions instead of 1.
And is that sort of the same case for math and science?
In mathematics and in science, there are additional what we now call open-ended or constructed responses, where students actually have to problem solve and actually write those responses in, for instance, a place value grid. Instead of having a choice of A, B, C, D, I would actually have to come up with a number, perhaps 32.06, and actually grid that in. So there are some differences and increases, again, trying to adjust for the increased rigor of what is expected of students in both college and career readiness.
And I assume that students have been practicing these new ways to answer the questions as they take the classes during the year.
Teachers have done a phenomenal job throughout the entire year of preparing our students for more items, increased rigor, helping our students stay focused during that time limit that they will now be faced with. We're confident our students have done a good job.
Go ahead, Barbara.
I just wanted to say for social studies, for the first time our world geography teachers and students will actually be taking a world geography test that covers world geography. In the past, they were taking a test that addressed those 8th grade standards at 9th grade. So this time they will actually be tested on the content in which they're being taught. So that's going to be different for our 9th grade teachers as well as for our students. And then they won't have any of those 8th grade objectives that they're used to seeing in the past on TAKS.
Was there something you wanted to
Yeah, I
add?
just wanted to add that our teachers are doing a phenomenal job. And it's not teaching to the rigor of the test, if you will. That is important. But what they're teaching to is the rigor of the standard. The standards themselves, whether they've stayed the same in some content areas or have been updated in other content areas, the standards themselves call for rigorous type thinking from students, rigorous type work, rigorous type interaction among students and with their teachers. So while the test, they say itself, has become more rigorous, if we teach to the level of the standards, our students should be successful.
And that's what we have been doing.
Yes.
Great. Now here's a question in Spanish. Mi nieta no habla muy bien el inglés. ¿Va a poder tomar el examen en español? Está en tercer año.
Sí, los niños en tercer, cuarto y quinto grado tienen la oportunidad de tomar los exámenes en español.
Great. If you have a student in special classes or in special education classes or who has special needs and has had their work modified throughout the year, will they have to take the STAAR test? And what happens if he or she does not pass the test but is doing well in school?
Students who are receiving special education services are going to participate in the assessment program. If a student is receiving modified instruction, then that student is going to take the STAAR modified test. All of this is going to be documented in the student's individualized education program.
Great. How do I know if my children will be receiving accommodations for dyslexia? That's been a very popular question.
Yes, yes. During the TAKS, there were accommodations for students with dyslexia services, and they were called bundled accommodations. With STAAR, those accommodations are no longer bundled. Those accommodations, though, are still available for students receiving dyslexia services, but this year with STAAR, the accommodations are individualized for students so that all students won't receive the same type of accommodation. We're really paying more attention to the individual needs of every student.
And this has been determined not like the day of the test, but throughout the year. I mean, this is something that the parents
Correct.
should already know whether their children are getting the accommodations. or not.
Correct. This will also be documented in the student's individualized education program or the student's 504 plan.
Okay.
So that's how we will know which students are going to receive which accommodations.
Great. Well, we have a question that came in through the phone. How does the STAAR affect students in 3rd through 5th grade as far as promotion to the next grade level? And we kind of talked a little bit about it, but I think we've been concentrating more on 9th grade. But I think a lot of parents in elementary school and, well, in middle school too, are probably a little concerned about how this is all going to work. So I don't know if somebody wants to explain it more.
Well, the Student Success Initiative has that requirement for grades 3 and 5 and 8. And because the performance standards are not available this year, that part of the Student Success Initiative is not going to be held this year. Once we have the performance targets, and probably in 2013, those standards or those requirements of the Student Success Initiative will go into effect.
Great. And again, we'll be back here next year explaining all this
That's
new
correct.
stuff.
So maybe just to clarify in another way, for this year, it's almost as if there is a 1-year deferment while the new assessment is put in place. So what parents previously experienced or were expecting with 3rd, 5th, and 8th grade is on hold, but will be re-implemented for the next school year.
Great. My son is taking Algebra 1 in 8th grade. Will he now have to take the 8th grade math test and the Algebra 1 end of course test, or how is that going to work?
No. In our district, and we want to try and keep it simple for our audience, the state allowed that to be a local district decision in one component. The component that's not optional is the assessment follows the course. As an 8th grader enrolled in Algebra 1, I will be required to take an Algebra 1 end of course. However, because I am in 8th grade, a district could have chosen not to have those students either take that 8th grade math, STAAR, or not. Our district opted not to, so that students would not be double tested. They will only be focused on the more difficult Algebra 1 end of course.
Yes.
And I'd like to add to that, so if the student is enrolled in Algebra 1 in middle school, or in this case 8th grade, and they're enrolled in social studies, and then they're enrolled in reading, and then they're enrolled in science, they still have to take the grade 8 STAAR test for those other courses, but they will not be required to take the grade 8 STAAR test for math.
Right, so only in the courses that they're taking for high school credit will they take the high school test.
Correct.
And as a follow-up, will students have to go to the high school to take the test, or will the test be administered at their middle school?
No, we will have administration sites at each of the schools where we offer high school courses at the middle schools. So if the student is enrolled in an Algebra 1 course at one of our middle schools, then they will be taking that assessment at that school.
Great. Will the STAAR, well, we already covered the 15%. Will some of the exams be taken over 2 days, or will the students only have 4 hours for each exam? Does that mean the exams are shorter, or is there, how is that going to work?
Okay, previously for tax, the students took the exams for as much time as they needed over 1 day. But for reading language arts, the test will be over 2 days. And so the students will have the opportunity to write their 2 compositions as well as to answer questions on the reading part of the test. So it's over 2 days. However, the test will only last 4 hours.
So Clarissa, for clarification for our audience, right, the 2-day exams are only applicable to the English language arts or writing components.
Yes.
So in our other content areas, those remain as 4-hour, 1-day assessments.
And the other part of the question was, are the tests shorter? No, they're not. They're actually longer.
They're actually longer.
But again, it'll be a 4-hour time limit for a longer test.
Okay, great. We have another question that came in through the phone. Can you explain again about the accommodations for dyslexia students?
Yes. For tax, previously, dyslexia accommodations were titled bundled accommodations because they were particular accommodations, and they typically were for all students receiving dyslexia services. But now with STAAR, we are making sure that students have very individualized accommodations, that we are paying attention to the individual needs of every student. So there are accommodations available for dyslexia students. However, if parents are hearing that there's no longer a bundle, that is correct. There's no longer a bundle, but the accommodations are available for dyslexia students.
If parents have any other questions, or they're kind of a little nervous about this whole thing, who should they talk to? Should they talk to the test coordinator at the school, or can they contact special education? What would you recommend?
The test coordinator at the campus would be a good contact. They can also contact the special education department at 972-925-4100.
Okay.
Sorry, 581-4100.
Great. ¿Qué pasa si mis hijos faltan a la escuela el día del examen?
Es muy importante que los niños asistan a la escuela si es posible. Ahora, si hay alguna emergencia y no pueden asistir, sí habrá otra oportunidad. Es importante que los padres se comuniquen con la escuela para saber cuál es ese otro día que tienen para tomar el examen.
I think this is an important question for everybody, so I'm going to repeat it in English. What happens if my child misses school the day of the exam? Cecilia?
Okay. There will be some makeup days, usually on the Friday of that same week, and so the students need to, or the parents need to find out what day that is. But it is very important that the students try to be there if all possible, so that they will not miss it.
And kind of in that vein, with the tax, students were able, especially in high school, they were able to take the exam several times until they passed it. Is that going to be the case for the end of course exams as well?
Most definitely. Since it is a graduation requirement, we will have any opportunity, whether they pass it or they want to improve on their score towards that accumulation score of graduation, they can take it during the opportunities during the year, which is a fall, a spring, and a summer.
Oh, so that's interesting. If they want to improve on their score, that is an option.
That is correct.
And they didn't have that option in TAPS,
No,
did they?
it was just a pass or fail, but they can improve it to even the college readiness, the satisfactory or the academic performance level 3 that we talked about earlier. They can try to improve it to that point.
And why would students want to do that? Why would they want to improve their score in the end of course exams?
Well, those scores are connected to recommended and distinguished achievement plans, as well as meeting the accumulation of when the state arrives at that, whatever that scale score is, times each of those particular end of course exams. But most importantly is to achieve those specialized diplomas of recommended or distinguished.
And that's tied to college entrance requirements.
Correct, absolutely.
Right. How different, I know we covered a little bit, well, a lot in Vincent's presentation, some of the differences that are going to be, that students are going to see in the exam. And the time limit is one of them, and the essays. Can any of you talk a little bit more about maybe the kinds of questions that will be, I don't know if parents know exactly what we mean by rigor. And so we have some sample questions on the website, but maybe you can elaborate a little bit.
So I could give one example. In science, for instance, the test, the assessments will be very highly graphical. There will be a lot of symbols and graphical representations. So by that I mean there are going to be charts, tables, graphs, diagrams, cycles that will be illustrated, and students are to infer information, apply scientific knowledge and problem solving to arrive at those responses. In the past, they might have seen a graphical representation in the question stem, but not necessarily in an answer. Now they may see it in the question and in each of the responses. So there's a lot of inferring, problem solving, high-level thinking, and its application and synthesis that students are going to be exposed to.
Great.
So if I hear you correctly, Dr. Elizalde, there's going to be like a graph and a line, and then there's going to be the question, but not the answer is not necessarily on that line. The kid's going to have to figure out, oh, that's what they meant, and then figure it out in the answer. So that kind of...
And even, absolutely correct. So even a better description with that intro, Mr. Reyes, would be, it's almost as if there are 4 questions within that one question, because I need to be able to analyze each of those different visual representations to then accurately respond to the question. Yes, sir.
And it'll be somewhat similar in the reading, if I'm not mistaken. So in the past, on tax, you could get a highlighter and a pen and make little notes and little marks and kind of have a trick to figure out the answer, because the answer was somewhere there that you could highlight it.
Yes, the answer was usually in the text, and you use your strategies to figure out that answer. But with STAAR, you're going to be, kids are going to have to be able to think deeply and to infer some of the answers. So they're going to have to use the text to come up with the extra ideas as they infer about those answers. Additionally, there will be drama and poetry on the test, where in the past the kids just had to figure out, for example, main idea. But in this case, children will have to figure out, for example, how the stage directions in a play or how some of the words in a poem create meaning for that particular kind of text. So in that way, they're having to think more deeply about the kinds of reading or in the kinds of reading that they will encounter.
And again, this is what they are normally required to do when they take college classes. This is the kind of rigor that they will see in college classes.
Well, this is a type of rigor they should be seeing in their classes right now,
Yes.
whether it's 3rd grade or college. So we hope, again, that's, if we're teaching to the level of the standard, we should see that type of instruction. I think it's important for Ms. Thomas to also clarify some of the world geography assessment differences. First of all, first thing being that this is the first time world geography is even tested.
As Mr. Reyes said, our world geography students will be taking the world geography EOC. One of the things that we've noticed about the EOC for world geography, our students will have to know the locations of countries and states and around the world. And so instead of having just a map and they identify, they'll have to draw mental maps and be able to tell the weather pattern and what the weather pattern may call. The weather pattern changes, and that's what's called a tsunami, or why do we have monsoons during certain part of the time of the year. And so that science piece that they have been taught now is going to be a part of their social studies that they will be assessed on. They'll have to look at the standard of living in different countries and make comparisons. They may not have been taught that at grade 9, maybe at grade 6, 7, or 8, but they'll also be assessed on it because it is a readiness standard, so the students will have to know that. So it's not look for an answer and it's blatant. It has to be something that the kids will build on from prior knowledge.
So we're not only preparing our students to be college ready, but we're also making them more global citizens.
By all means.
Very good. And speaking of global citizens, we have a lot of students in our district who are not Spanish speakers, that speak, we have about 70 languages spoken in our households. How are their needs going to be accommodated with the STAAR?
Well, the state has now set several new accommodations to support the language acquisition of the students. And so one of the accommodations is the students are allowed to use a dictionary. And there are several other accommodations that are available to the teachers to identify that the students will need so that they can be successful on the exam, so that language doesn't become a barrier for them to demonstrate how smart they are.
Right, because they may have all the knowledge and skills, they may just not know how to communicate it.
Correct.
Great. We have a question from Kimberly who called in. What will be the STAAR grading scale? Will the test count for or against school averages? And I guess not this year, but do we have any idea how this is going to work in the future?
Well, you know, they have accountability task forces that are starting to look at that this spring, so a lot of that is going to be determined over the course of the next several months. So we have yet to hear that for as far as a school rating or school ranking. I forgot the first part of the question already.
What will be the STAAR grading scale? And that's one of the things will be
the
determined.
performance targets that we are referring to for grades 3 through 8 are yet to be defined, will not be provided to the district till late fall or January 2013, exactly how that's going to fall in place.
And because they're waiting for the students to take the test to see how they do to determine that.
Right, and they'll be looking at the data in relationship to other college readiness tests. They want to align that, and so they need to determine where that would fall.
And if I could add, just from our previous experiences with other assessments in our state, while again they haven't committed, the state has not committed to anything, we should probably keep in our minds there, in all likelihood, I think there's a possibility we could have a sliding type scale as we've had with other assessments. They've talked about the possibility of a particular performance standard at this grade for year 1 and then year 2 until we would reach the final performance standard that might be expected. So to make it simple, like maybe year 1 it would be like 70%, and then the next year it might be 80%, and so on.
And we'll know all this, like you said, sometime
Next school year.
We have a question from the phone. Why is the test being timed? And I know we've kind of covered it, but you know, if we could maybe expand on that a little bit, Vincent.
Well, part of the thinking is that many of our students in college ready will have to take an SAT or an AP test, and those tests are timed as well. And so that was part of the thinking behind it. And some of the other reasons.
One of the reasons for reading was something that Mr. Reyes alluded to earlier, and that was that kids could use strategies to highlight and write notes on the side of their paper before they determined what the answer was, and those strategies took too long. It wasn't allowing the kids to think. They were just, you know, figuring out the answer and finding it in the text and then recording that answer on their test. Well, with STAAR, kids are going to have to think, and as they read and think and then answer the question. And certainly we all use some kind of reading strategy when we're figuring out the answer, but it's more about thinking and not just, you know, underlining and circling and all of that. And that really took too much time, so kids were at school until late in the evening.
And so if I could add to that as well, like in mathematics, students would then provide or perform, particularly at lower grades, each different operation that they could think of and get different answers until they would see which of those answers most closely resembled the choices, as opposed to actually attacking that problem and solving it directly. The move in our state is, again, college career readiness, which means without being an extreme, we want to move away from just simple memorization to a conceptualization of higher order thinking skills.
Okay. I think we may have already covered this in some way, but this is a call that came in. When will parents, students, and teachers receive the valid results? I guess by valid they mean the final results for passing grades. You mentioned January.
January for grades 3 through 8. For grade 9, though, we will receive them in June, early June, and the parents will receive that, and we need to be looking for that to determine whether they need to attend summer school to help them before the next administration in July.
And I guess we've been covering STAAR a lot, but there may be parents out there wondering about TAKS if they have students who are repeating the 9th grade or in 10th, 11th, and 12th grades. How is that going to work? How are they going to get results? Because, I mean, they need to know to graduate, so.
The TAKS results will be available at the end of May when we've received them in the past, and the students will know whether they passed or failed before they leave school.
So that doesn't
That's
change.
not changing.
But perhaps we should reiterate who is still in the TAKS system to help our audience out. So first-time 9th graders are those students, that population that falls into the STAAR end-of-course requirements. Students that have already been in the 9th grade, either repeating the 9th grade or are now in 10th, 11th, or 12th grade, are still under their previous assessment, which is TAKS. So our 10th and 11th graders are taking TAKS. And that exit level 11th grade is still the requirement for those students for graduation purposes.
And will continue to be until all those students have graduated.
Correct.
Students that need accommodations, extended time, what if administrators, teachers fail to submit a 504 student's name for testing modifications? How will the student obtain these modifications?
The accommodations triangle is a great resource. It's located on the Texas Education Agency website, the TEA website, and that triangle lists all of the accommodations that a student can take, and it also talks about the criteria that a student would need to meet and the eligibility that a student would need to have in order to have those accommodations. Again, these conversations are going to take place during the student's ARD meeting. It's going to be outlined in the student's individualized education plan or in the 504 plan for the student, and those decisions are very individualized. So these decisions would have to be made in those committee meetings.
Next week, what subject will 9th graders be tested on?
Next week, students will be tested on reading and in writing.
Okay, and that's the case for students really in the elementary and middle school as well?
All grades, 3rd through 8th, and 9th grade end-of-course exams.
Okay. And this is another question from Alicia, who called in. Will the students have to have a certain score on the STAAR in order for them to graduate, walk their senior year in high school? Is this new assessment designed to promote and encourage graduation? I know we may not have the exact score, but can you talk a little bit about the accumulating that score and how will that work in the different areas?
Yes, each one of the 4 content areas has 3 end-of-course exams. From those 12 exams, then students will have to have a total score in order to graduate. So let me give you an example. In mathematics, they have the Algebra 1, the Geometry, and the Algebra 2. The state has not set any type of scale score or standards for that yet, but let's say that in order for the student to graduate, they had to have a total of 1,200 points in math. So if you take the 3 tests, you should end up with at least 1,200 points in order to graduate. So that means that you would have to average at least 400 points on each one of the tests to meet the 1,200. If you do not meet that 1,200, then that's what keeps you from graduating. And it will be the same scenarios in reading, in social studies, and in science with their 3 tests. So you have to meet a total cumulative score based on the test in your tested area. Now, the other thing to remember with that is, if you want to graduate on a recommended or distinguished plan, then you not only have to meet that certain minimum standard on Algebra 2 and on English 3, you actually have to score at the higher levels in order to graduate with a recommended or distinguished plan.
And so, for example, if I did really, really well in geometry, and I did really well in Algebra 2, but not so well in Algebra 1, and there's an opportunity to take a test over, would I be able to go back and take the Algebra 1 test again, like a couple of years after I took the first one, or how does?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes, so
great.
you could be a junior in high school and realize, you know what, if I can go back and retake that Algebra 1, I could raise my score. Then even if they passed it, let's say that they barely passed it and they want to go back and retake it, at any point they can.
Great. So that, I mean, that's really helpful for students, because again, they can actively increase their scores and do better and graduate with a higher. So that's a great change.
Maria Carmen, can I go back to
Sure.
the previous question about tests next week? Because there will be students in 5th grade and 8th grade taking the math, not just the reading.
Okay.
And it will be certain grades taking the writing, grade 4 and grade 7, and grade 5, and also 8 taking the reading, because 3rd grade will not be taking reading next week. So there's just a certain ones that need to take the take a little longer for them to score, where it's the writing, it's not just the ABCs, and that's why they take them a little bit earlier, as well as grade 5 and 8 when it becomes that critical part during the Student Success Initiative. They have opportunities to test, and this is about the time they would normally be testing.
Great. And you can check with the school to see what test they'll be taking, or we have a calendar on our website, and then you can check that calendar as well. I think we have time for maybe 1 or 2 more questions. So what will the district do if students fail the test? This is from Rosalinda, who called in.
So for this first year, since we really don't have a pass or fail for grades 3 through 8, we would be looking at the data district-wide to inform our instruction, and again making updates to our curriculum planning guides. At the 9th grade, or the end of course, we will be providing some summer school preparations for students to retake that in the July session.
Right. So really, not only is the state going to be making adjustments and changes, but the district itself is going to look at the data and also make adjustments in what we're teaching.
Absolutely.
Great. And a question from Alicia. What will happen if a student does not finish the time test? How will this affect the overall score?
Unfortunately, it's my understanding they will be scored on the entire exam. So if they do not complete it, then it will be the items that were left blank will be counted against the student.
Correct.
So that's why it's so critical that we also remind our parents that on those days our students are getting plenty of rest, they can stay focused, have great breakfast, and be encouraged so that they can keep their mind focused on the exam day.
And it's important that they get there on time as well, right? Because
Absolutely.
once the exam starts, if you
That's
come
it.
in late, then
You're missing time.
That is
Well, they will start the child will get the full 4 hours.
Okay,
But you
so
want to not to disrupt and to be there, but the student will get the full 4 hours.
great. And what happens? I mean, the test takes 4 hours. What happens the rest of the school day? Do they go back to classes? Is it up to each school? How is that going to work?
As of right now, each campus will determine what they will do the rest of the day. They will, first of all, determine the 4-hour time period in which they will administer the exams, and then they will have the rest of the day to go back to class.
And I think this is the time limit is a big change, because I've monitored for tax in the past, and it does, some of these students do take the whole day to take the test, and so this will be a big change. Is there something that parents can do at home to prepare them, to kind of get them used to this, to having a time limit? How can parents be a partner in this preparation efforts?
Well, I know that teachers are sending a lot of material home for students to also work on, and so perhaps even instituting something at home that would allow the students to stay focused for a particular period of time, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, to help our students, again, stay focused and build that endurance for the exam, I think would also be helpful. And we know our teachers and our campus principals are also working with that in the classroom, but any help our parents can give us is greatly appreciated.
Another thing they can do, on the state website, there are some, the state released some sample items in the form of exams, kind of like practice exams. They can allow the kids to take that and you know, do it within a time limit. Maybe not give them all 4 exams on that day, but maybe even a portion of it and give them 30 minutes or an hour to take a part of that exam.
And we have those on our website as well, so they can just go there. You know, I think that's kind of an important question, and parents who are Spanish speakers might also want to hear the answers. So if one of you can maybe explain that. ¿Qué pueden, esto del cambio del límite de tiempo para tomar el examen es muy importante porque estamos acostumbrados a que los niños tienen todo el día y muchos niños se tomaban todo el día. ¿Qué es lo que pueden hacer los padres en la casa para ayudar a los niños a acostumbrarse a tomar el examen en las 4 horas?
Bueno, primero es importante que los padres se informen, que estén bien informados de cuáles exámenes sus hijos van a tener que tomar y luego los requisitos de esos exámenes, y hay mucha información en el website del distrito. Segundo, pueden hablar con sus hijos. Es importante que cuando que les pregunten a los hijos qué aprendiste, y cuando están leyendo que les pregunten cosas como dónde, cuándo, por qué, ¿verdad? Que traten de hablar con sus hijos, de que les pregunten cosas no nomás que son sí o no, sino que los hagan que expliquen por qué es lo que están aprendiendo, mucho por qué, cómo, que los niños practiquen. Enséñame, demuéstrame, para que los niños practiquen ese pensamiento crítico que va a ser necesario para tener éxito en los exámenes.
Okay. Well, thank you. And I think we don't have time for any more questions. We need to move on. But I want to thank all the panel for their thoughtful questions, and I want to thank the audience for participating and for sending us their questions. Now we're going to have some resources and some tips for parents that Tanya Brown is going to tell us about.
Okay. Dallas ISD has put together a web page that includes multiple STAAR resources for parents and students. The resources include videos, links to other websites, and calendar dates. The Teaching and Learning Department has compiled a list of tutorial videos for previously hard-to-master concepts. Students and parents can select a concept and watch a video that has been reviewed by the respective department. Also, the district has a web page that includes frequently asked STAAR questions. Questions from this forum will also be added to the list. Students can also look at practice questions that have been released by TEA. You can also find additional resources on TEA's website. Finally, Dallas ISD is offering STAAR end-of-course prep sessions for free. Here are a few parent tips. Parents play a major role in ensuring that students are prepared for the test, and we wanted to give you some suggestions of things you could do at home so your child is successful. Add a few minutes of reading time to each day in the days, or ideally weeks, leading up to the test. Talking to your child's teacher to see if there are areas that need additional attention is important. Find out if the school is offering additional tutoring. Encourage your children by letting them know they will do well on the test. Make sure they have their uniform or clothes for the next day ready the night before the test, so that they can have their books and backpacks ready to go. Make sure your child goes to bed early the night before the test so he or she is well rested. Make sure that he or she eats a nutritious breakfast at home or at school on the day of the test. Get to school on time or a few minutes early to make sure your child is relaxed and ready to take the test. Children who are rested and well-fed will have the ability to concentrate, which will increase their confidence and raise their chances of a successful completion of the exams.
On behalf of everyone at the Dallas ISD and the panel of experts, I'd like to thank everybody watching us for their questions and participation. We will have 2 other live forums, one on April 18 and one on May 2nd. You can find more information about these forums on the district's STAAR webpage. If you have any questions that you want us to answer during the April and May forums, please email us at staar@dallasisd.org or fill out the form available through the link on the STAAR Live Forum page at www.dallasisd.org/STAAR. Thank you again for participating and have a great afternoon.